Time loops, mysteries, and intense combat are some of what makes Deathloop an experience you won't quickly forget. But at the core of the brilliantly designed world of Blackreef, there is a deeper story of love, friendship, and family, and the intense consequences of betraying it all.
Welcome to the first video in a new series called Supercut, where we take one game and complete it from the very beginning all the way through to the very end in one video. So, grab your snacks, grab your popcorn, grab your drinks, because it's going to be a long one. Quick disclaimer before we begin, the footage and audio for this video was recorded in December of 2021, a year before the Golden Loop update was released. So the alternate ending is not included in this video. And yes, of course, there will be spoilers. Duh. So, without further ado, welcome to the very first Supercut. My name is and this is Deathloop.
For the last time, why can't you remember?
I don't know if you just give me a second.
Oh, you're not even trying.
Oh, lady, I have no idea. Oh, shit, that's not good.
You just hurry up already.
After being murdered by a lady and waking up on some beach, I was greeted by some accusatory glowing text, a crusty SMG, and my own personal supervillain lair.
Feels familiar.
In the lair was a square purple donut, otherwise known as a trinket, that gave me a power-up, and a map of the island called Blackreef. Pinned to the map were 8 profiles of people I didn't know, with a photograph and short summary of who they were. Charlie Montague, kind of a genius, kind of a moron, entirely a nerd. Harriet Morse, a self-help and spiritual guru who was involved in a crash that messed with her mind. Egor Serling, a self-styled scientist and an eager explorer. Ramblin' Frank Spicer, a brilliant musician with a quick temper and a dead-eye shot. Aleksis Dorsey, very rich with a mansion on a hill. Julianna Blake, a mean bookworm who can hold a drink. Dr. Wenjie Evans, a brilliant scientist that never stopped working, carried a grudge. And Fia Zborowska, a drug-addicted artist with rich parents. All of them except Frank and Wenjie held what was called a slab, but more on those later. I picked up the hack-a-majig, unlocked the door, and was told I already knew the code. The code for what? The code for that. As I had literally just woken up on some beach after being stabbed by a lady, I had no idea what the code was. I proceeded to follow the glowing text, and it taught me how to say my own name.
Colt! Hey, is my name Colt?
I learned how to kick, water is deadly. The lady was in fact Julianna and wanted everyone to kill me, and I had a mean swing with a machete. I proceeded around the cliff face and found a posh mansion guarded by 4 idiots. After dispatching of them, Julianna called me.
Oh, yeah.
Through speaking to Julianna, I established there's this thing called the Loop and that I wanted to break it, and she was very angry with me and wanted to kill me. She told me to head to the library, so I did, and after pulling the lever she told me not to pull, she whisked me into the air.
What?
And then slam dunked me into the ground using a slab. The glowing text said jump, so I jumped and was caught by another cult. He told me where to find the code that I needed to know.
You wrote it on the Blackreef postcard.
Then Julianna smoked him with a shotgun to the face and I fell to my death. After waking back up on the beach, the loop that Julianna had mentioned was clearly in reference to a time loop where when I died, the day began again. Things were starting to click. I headed into the lair and found the postcard addressed to me from me, which not only told me the code, but the address of my own apartment. Before heading there, I decided to head back to Julianna's mansion just to see if she was still there. This time the doors were locked and there was a note saying she'd relocated somewhere else, right in the heart of Blackreef. I headed back, punched in the code, picked up some gear, and found one of those slabs I mentioned earlier.
What the fuck?
This slab, called Reprise, granted me the ability to die twice before the loop reset, because, as I found out earlier, death meant a loop reset.
It's cold and weird.
I headed to Updam, a cliffside town and one of the 4 regions within Blackreef that I could travel to, with the goal in mind of locating my apartment. After traversing some rocks and killing some goons, I found a secret bunker door that needed a special password that I obviously didn't know.
Hello?
I killed some more goons, stole a shotgun, hacked a sensor, and watched a man be peer pressured into jumping to his death. The door to my second floor apartment was locked, so I had to climb through the window. On the table was a blue trinket, which wasn't as good as a purple one, another weapon, and a letter addressed to me from Frank, one of the 8 faces on my vision board. He called me brother, and going by the pictures, we were definitely close. He told me that he didn't want me sleeping rough on the beach, so he bought me my very own apartment. There was a safe with yet another code that I didn't know, a silenced weapon, a photograph of a stranger called Lila telling me to never give up, and a terminal with some archived messages. The first was a group chat between the 8 villains plus me, where Julianna had announced that I had gone rogue. They contemplated what to do and made sure that they knew to protect themselves and that this thing called the LPP was their salvation to protecting the loop. They very quickly realised that I was still in the group chat, and so the admin, Charlie the nerd, kicked me out. The second message was a private chat between me and Julianna where we shared our thoughts about the loop the night before it started. She was feeling nervous, but I told her I'd done it before and it would be fine. We marvelled at the fact that the entire loop was run from a single control room at a region called the Complex.
This is too easy.
After opening those 2 messages, 2 more messages popped up that were clearly spam emails, and me being me, I had to open them and was greeted by an obnoxious message and a radio broadcast from Charlie telling everyone where I was so I needed to get out fast. It wasn't a problem though, because it was clear I needed to head to the complex and find the loop control room. As I entered the complex, Julianna confided in me that we actually used to be friends.
We used to be friends, Colt.
I hurried toward the control center, hacked a sensor, and waltzed past some Eternalists. In the control center, I watched an Eternalist backchat Wenjie Evans over the radio because he wanted to have some fun, to which Wenjie commanded the others to kill him.
Second in command over there. Kill this idiot. Now.
I dished out some headshots and pulled a lever which began playing a video which cut out immediately because it was out of juice.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
I charged the battery, and whilst waiting for it to charge, I read an article about the Eon program. It explained that the loop was designed to give people the chance to live however they wanted to, completely guilt-free, because every night the day would reset and they'd be able to carry on like nothing had happened. Kind of like Westworld, where they get to live out all of their depraved fantasies, but instead of assaulting humanoid robots, they were assaulting real human people. After watching the short video presented by Egor, he provided me with some key information to understand not only the loop, but also how to break it. He explained that a cataclysmic event happened on the island of Blackreef a long time ago that tore the fabric of space and time, an event they called the Anomaly. Egor and the villains, otherwise known as the Visionaries, founded the Eon program to study the imbalances found emanating from the anomaly. Because the Visionaries were doing important work, the Eternalists were tasked with protecting the Visionaries at all costs to ensure nothing happened to them. Egor also said that if the loop was threatened, that I needed to refer to the LPP, which could be found in the security office on Freestad Rock, so that's where I headed. I found a hidden door behind a wooden pallet, but it was locked. Then I found the entrance to wherever that door led, but I decided to leave that for now and come back later. I needed to find this LPP. I took out some Eternalists and headed toward the security office. I found a poster of myself which portrayed me as the head of security, who Egor had told me that was who I needed to speak to.
Notify the head of security and he will tell you how to use the LPP to protect the loop.
I hacked my way into the office and found that the security office safe that contained the LPP had been relocated up to my flat back in Updam.
It's in my flat.
Fortunately, in a poetic letter left by Fia the artist, she left me the code to the safe, so all I needed to do was head back to Updam and retrieve the LPP. There was also a note written by me left on the counter detailing the slabs owned by each of the Visionaries, but I'll discuss them when we get to them. There was also a voice recording of Harriet, who thanked all of the Eternalists for pledging money toward the Eon program. She explained that now the Eon program was in full swing, all of the members were able to live on the island, stuck in the time loop, doing whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and the masks that everyone wore was to allow them a new identity as an Eternalist. After heading back to Updam and finding that it was significantly more dangerous at night, I arrived at the safe only to find a letter from
Julianna!
You don't call me.
After a cute back and forth clearly displaying how much we hated each other, Julianna dropped by with the intent on causing me grievous bodily harm. She'd also locked my tunnel system and told me that I need to hack the antenna to get it back open. As I was hacking the antenna, she just dropped in with absolutely no plan, so I blasted her to Kingdom Come and picked up my very first slab. Shift gave me the ability to teleport, but it was short-lived because as soon as I went back through the tunnels, the day reset and I lost it. I woke up once again on the dirty beach, and with a bit of self-motivation, I was sure that I'd be breaking this loop. I headed to my flat, cracked open the safe, and found the LPP. It wasn't a powerful weapon as I'd hoped,
That is not what I wanted.
but it did provide the exact means of knowing how to end the loop, as explained here.
The Loop Preservation Protocol. A bunch of big words to make a simple point. I kill every visionary in one day, I break the loop. Period. I know where they spend time, but I'm guessing it won't be as easy as hunting them down. Good thing I'm one stubborn motherfucker.
After reading the LPP, the other me showed up
Yep.
and told me where I needed to head next.
Wenjie's lab. Figure out residuum, it'll make your life easier.
I waited until the afternoon and headed to the complex to infiltrate Wenjie's lab and figure out residuum. Whilst on my way over there, Aleksis could be heard broadcasting over the loudspeaker for everyone to hear his invitation to Wenjie to come to his evening mansion party, and this would become important later. Heading into her lab, I immediately saw that there was more than one Wenjie, which was confusing at first as she was one of the two visionaries that didn't own a slab. Something else was going on and I needed to figure out what. I hacked into a turret which blasted the present Wenjies, each producing a ball of energy after dying that teleported somewhere else. In a notebook on Wenjie's desk, I found details regarding the byproducts of the anomaly. Residuum was a highly unstable type of energy that appeared to be outside of space and time. Slabs were metallic blocks traced with stabilized residuum. They manipulated the power of the anomaly, allowing for a distortion in space-time. Trinkets were residuum-infused objects that allowed someone to warp local space-time in small ways entirely created by Wenjie. Visitors were people from other timelines composed entirely from residuum. Breaches were ruptures in space as space-time became fused across multiple timelines. And ravaging was something I couldn't even try to comprehend, so you can figure that one out for yourself. I continued deeper into Wenjie's lab and found a plethora of Wenjies all just dying to kill me.
Got 10 of you left.
Which they did. However, I managed to get my own back and take out a few more. I headed to the bottom floor of her lab and found a document that provided some juicy information. Wenjie had successfully anchored the loop to the Visionaries through the anomaly. She confirmed that since she'd been able to accomplish this, she should, in theory, be able to anchor an infused object to a Visionary, allowing that Visionary to keep objects in the next loop. She also explained that the anomaly only produced small amounts of unstable residuum, meaning that although the infusion process would probably work, due to the lack of residuum available, it was impossible to accomplish practically. However, in the second note, Wenjie kindly detailed that each visionary, due to being anchored by the anomaly, held a significant amount of residuum which could be retrieved upon their death. The only catch was that a visionary death meant that the loop became unstable. She proposed that the best way to retrieve the residuum from a visionary was to have a visitor visionary who, as we learned earlier, is composed entirely from residuum. Wenjie attempted this by calling herself from different timelines and killing them to retrieve the residuum, but realised that when a visitor visionary died, their residuum collapsed into the other visionaries, so still, the only way to retrieve the residuum was to kill the main visionary, threatening the loop's stability. She couldn't commit suicide because she wanted to use the infusion machine on herself and wouldn't have been able to do so if she was dead. She contemplated coaxing Aleksis into dying for her, but the idea of tons of him put her off massively. She contemplated me, but said that I'd gone rogue and was too dangerous to replicate. However, this may explain the reason for thousands of other cults, because there was clearly a time where I hadn't gone rogue, and so she may have used me for her experiment. All of that to say, also, in a voice recording left by Wenjie, she stated that the fact that I'd gone rogue and mine and Julianna's relationship had broken down proved two things. Firstly, that the time loop had been active for some time and it wasn't the first day as she and everyone else believed. And secondly, that me and Julianna were the only two that retained our memories through the loops. With all of this knowledge, I headed back to pick up the portable harvester, ghostbusted Wenjie's corpse and stepped into Willy Wonka's tube, only to die and wake up once again on the dusty beach. Only this time,
It's Word?
Armed with the knowledge of the LPP, the power of infusion, and the determination to break the loop,
Who's the super scientist now? Ah!
I headed to Carl's Bay with the intention of wiping out Harriet Morse. As I stepped through the door, Julianna told me that this wasn't the first time that I had infused myself. I explored a little and found this trivia machine called the Yerva, which asked tough questions about the history of the Eon program and Blackreef, to which I obviously didn't know any. I also found a safe, which, again, I obviously didn't have the code for. As I moved to the coast, I found a letter where some Eternalists agreed to meet in the afternoon when the water was frozen over to get across to the plane that had crashed in the ice. So, I waited until the afternoon and joined them, where I found a powerful but loud weapon called a peppermill. Since the only time I was able to take out Harriet was the morning, I decided to have a wander around Carl's Bay to see what mysteries I could uncover. I found a science experiment set up by some rogue Eternalists that were harnessing a similar power to Wenjie, where they were pulling people from different timelines, killing them and absorbing their residuum to feed into a machine. I decided to give it a go, but I was too slow with it and the portal closed before I could fill the tank up. I inserted it into the machine anyway, and after a couple of waves of enemies, I was presented with 2 low-class trinkets. After that, I moved towards the upper part of Carl's Bay and noticed an inviting open window. I dispatched of the congregation outside and headed in, taking care not to trip the mine. Unfortunately, on opening the door, my presence was detected by a sensor which immediately fried a keypad. Not that I knew what the code was anyway. A note on the desk written by a pick provided details of another Eternalist that remembered previous loops, just like Julianna and me. This seemed incredibly important, but there was nothing more I could do. I headed over to the hangars where Harriet had been that morning and took care of the crowds, but there wasn't much to do there. As I was moving around, I stumbled across a small container with the label Otto's Workshop and a note from an Elena telling everyone to keep their hands off the container because it was filled to the brim with Frank's fireworks. Fireworks that he set off every evening. After that, I headed to the Mask Emporium run by an Eternalist called Amador. He had closed off the inners of his mask-making empire because he'd been specifically chosen by Harriet to be the first day sacrifice, almost like an offering in celebration of the new world they were going to be living in. What he and everyone else didn't realise was that nobody would remember anything when the loop reset, so he was destined to be the first day sacrifice for eternity, unless I was able to save him. After that, I headed to the lower part of Carl's Bay and found a small workshop with a letter written by an anonymous Eternalist who was furious that somebody had stolen something from him whilst detailing exactly where they'd gone, Freestad Rock. I headed around the cove and found a secret door with no power, so turned back. That was everything I found during the afternoon on Carl's Bay, so I headed to the tunnels, infused some trinkets and looped to the morning to attempt to take on Harriet. After taking out a few Eternalists, I made my way around the coast towards Hangar 2 where Harriet was conducting her opening ceremony. As I entered, I noticed Amador the Mask Maker dangling from the ceiling, declaring that he was ready to be sacrificed. As I was making my way around to unlock the door to Harriet's bedroom, she announced to the Eternalist that she wasn't just going to kill Amador, she was going to make him suffer, because that was what the day was all about. Acting on your darkest impulses and enjoying it. After killing Amador, she encouraged the Eternalists to embrace the chaos themselves, and they scattered. After breaking into her bedroom, I read her minicom and found a dialogue between her and Julianna, where she said that once she'd killed Amador in the morning ritual, she'd be heading to a secret location off the grid, which made it clear that the only opportunity that I had to kill her was in the morning. In another dialogue between Harriet and Egor, the self-proclaimed founder of the Eon program, it's revealed that I was locked away in an asylum before Egor paid my way out and I showed him how to get to Blackreef. With all that juicy knowledge, I attempted a headshot on Harriet, but she was way too strong for that, and so a firefight ensued where I may or may not have died. I quickly ran back and gathered up my residuum. I then gathered up Harriet's residuum, trinkets, and my very first slab, Nexus. After that, I read her diaries and left the scene. I tried out my new power, which granted me the ability to link people together, so when I killed one of them, the others died too. I headed back to Pick's apartment, but the window was shut, so I needed to come back some other time. In frustration, I booted some dude off a cliff. I headed back to the little boat workshop and this time found a safe to which I didn't know the code to, obviously. This was probably what was stolen in the afternoon, so to find out the code I'd need to head to Freestad Rock, but I had bigger fish to fry than trying to find the code to some safe. Next up was Charlie Montague. I headed back to Updam to take out the self-proclaimed creative genius whilst trying out my new Nexus ability. I wandered around a little bit before heading to my apartment, but there was nothing new there, so I headed over to Charlie's LARP called Conditional Attachment in an attempt on his life. Having used all my ammo for my silenced weapon, I had to be extra careful not to draw attention to myself. Fortunately, the Nexus ability would be a benefit. I headed to the main door, but then decided against heading through, afraid of what I'd find on the other side, so I attempted to look for a back route in. And I found one, along with some ammo for my silenced weapon. I climbed through a window and noticed a pool of toxic gas where an Eternalist had just been chilling before dying in front of me. I headed out the back, took out the riffraff and found a door that I wasn't able to access without something called a class pass. I also found a crank wheel which connected to these pipes which were connected to some toxic gas. I assumed it was to do with the pool of gas I'd just seen, so I went to check, and it was. With the gas dispersed, I was able to find a new trinket. I headed back around and up and proceeded onward in an attempt to find and kill Charlie. I was desperate for his shift slab after having used it briefly when Julianna first invaded. I worked my way slowly upwards and found a control room where Charlie's robot 2-Bit was living. Hands down, 2-Bit, the best character in the entire game for sure.
Master Charlie will sparkle hard.
Inside 2-Bit was a chunk of actual human brain, and thanks to a voice recording left on the side, it appeared that Wenjie had cut a piece of Charlie's brain out at his request in order to put it into 2-Bit and make him an incredible supercomputer. Whilst talking to 2-Bit, he revealed that he was not only the system operator of Charlie's giant LARP, but he was also responsible for the broadcasts that went out every day throughout the entirety of Blackreef. More importantly, he also remembered between loops, just like me, Julianna, and that pic from Carl's Bay. This was huge. I asked 2-Bit to evacuate the building, which left just Charlie and I. Thanks to his shift ability and half a brain, he began teleporting all over the place and couldn't stay still for longer than a few seconds, making it difficult to get a shot on him. Whilst he was flitting about the place, I found a minicom with a conversation between Charlie and Fia, which revealed that the two of them were an item and planned to meet at Freestad Rock during the afternoon. I clambered to the sky and hopped across the planet in an attempt to catch Charlie in one of his teleportation spots. I missed him the first time round, but managed to crack his neck on his next teleport. I picked up the shift slab and continued to his bedroom to gather more intel about him and Fia. Whilst flipping his place, I came across a journal which had detailed information about the connection between the loop and the Visionaries, but it wasn't anything that I hadn't already learned. The last clue I found in his room was a giant photo of him and Fia, actually placed on his mattress, which I thought was a bit weird. The photo was of them getting cozy at Freestad Rock. With Charlie dead, the shift slab in my arsenal, and the intel regarding where to go next, I headed out of Updam, down into Freestad Rock. This time round, I headed to the bunker that I'd neglected to visit the first time. Inside, I found a photograph of all of the Visionaries except Julianna. The bunker I was in was left over from the previous operation that happened before Eon took over. There were a couple of notes about the remnants of the operation that took place before Eon and how some of the Visionaries were looking to gain entry, but that was it for this location. No sign of Charlie and Fia. I headed out along the coast and spotted the plane wreckage from the photo poking out of the water. Following the coast around the corner, I found a hidden bunker which was where the photo was taken. Inside was a large computer contraption with a code, again, I didn't know. I tried guessing the code to no avail and then opened the journal next to the buttons. Fia had left a voice recording for Charlie explaining to him where to find the code for the machine so he could get in. It was in a safe in Carl's Bay next to the Yerva. I headed out of the bunker, back to the tunnels and headed over to Carl's Bay to find this code. At night, Carl's Bay became a bit of a gauntlet where Charlie had set up mystery boxes all across the bay, and if I found them all, I'd win a special prize, aka a shotgun. I decided I'd tackle that once I'd found this safe. Inside the safe was a journal with a written exchange between Charlie and Fia. Fia was worried that since Dr. Wenjie had helped carve out a piece of Charlie's brain, that she was somehow watching them, but Charlie put her at ease by saying since he'd set up the minicom in Wenjie's office, he also knew the passcode to get in, and gave it to Fia if she felt like heading in there to redecorate. Fia then explained to Charlie that to understand the code to get it into their love shack, he'd need to find the 4 pictograms dotted around her domain, each one revealing a number to punch into the device.
With that, I concluded that since Charlie and Fia were together during the afternoon on Freestad Rock, I needed to take them out together at that time. That meant the morning was for Harriet in Carl's Bay, and the afternoon was for Charlie and Fia in Freestad Rock. This left a bit of a problem since Wenjie was only available during the afternoon in her lab, so I'd need to get her into a different location if that were even possible. But before that, I decided to take on Charlie's challenge. I found a map with glowing lights indicating the locations of these mystery boxes. The blue ones had already been opened and the grey ones were yet to be discovered. I swiftly worked my way through each puzzle and box until I was finally able to get back to the warehouse to face the final gauntlet. Once the last switch had been pulled, I grabbed the shotgun and headed out. The next morning, I headed to Freestad Rock in an attempt to take out Frank Spicer. To get into Frank's fortress, I needed to put on a class pass, the same class pass that was needed to get into Charlie's secret room in his castle. I didn't like the idea of a class pass because it meant that none of my slab abilities worked, including the reprise slab, meaning that if I died once, the loop would reset. As I was making my way over the roof to find another way in, and invading Julianna tried taking me out, but I was able to get the one up and put her down. Unfortunately, this alerted everyone nearby to my presence, so I had to run and gun for a little while. I did, however, manage to pick up a Nexus upgrade from Julianna, so it wasn't for nothing. After scaling down the other side of the building, I found a small hole in the rocks leading directly into Frank's place without the need of any class pass. Take that, Frank. With my slabs intact and my skills unmatched, I slowly made my way into Frank's, accidentally alerting everyone to my presence and getting myself killed. Had I been wearing a class pass, that would have been game over, or loop reset. I slowly wormed my way around the building and eventually found a route into Frank's office space, alerting everyone to my presence yet again. Frank had locked himself away in his recording booth, which had bulletproof glass with 2 henchmen, rendering him untouchable. I skulked around his bedroom looking for clues, but as I was watching my hack turret decimate some goons upstairs, it appeared that Frank tried to make a break for it and came out of hiding. I tried using the Nexus slab on Frank, hoping that when I killed his henchman he'd die too, but he was apparently too strong for that. That didn't matter though, because my toxic gas gun took him out quite easily. Before heading downstairs, I checked out his minicom where he'd written a private message to Otto, the firework maker. Frank explained that because it was first day, they needed a ton of fireworks to make it special, because the opening night only happened once, or so he assumed. He told Otto that the fireworks were hidden behind Harriet's hangar in Carl's Bay, in the container, and that he'd send him the code at noon. I gathered up Frank's residuum and his legendary weapon and headed into the recording booth to find a drunken recording of Frank and Harriet where Frank explained he didn't know a thing about fireworks and he accidentally messed up a bunch of fireworks before by messing with the flaps.
First time I ever tried to do fireworks, I completely botched the flappy things. Got them stuck tight as a real tight thing.
That was enough information for me to know what I needed to do to take care of Frank and his fireworks. I looked around the rest of the building but didn't find anything particularly important, so headed over to the antenna to unlock the tunnels and then headed back to Updam in an attempt to take Charlie's shift slab again. On my way back to the tunnels, I got taken out by an invading Julianna, leaving just one more attempt before a loop reset. I managed to get the upper hand and picked up the Carnesis slab for the first time. I headed to the tunnels and looped to the next morning in an effort to find Otto's workshop. In a note that had been left on the burning building at noontime, it stated that Otto had tried to draw too much power from all over Updam, which caused a fire. So what I needed to do was stop him from drawing too much power so that I could access the building and gain access to his minicom at noon. I headed to the workshop and found the firework machine that was working way too hard. I checked the minicom and sure enough, there was the message that Frank had sent. So I set about destroying all of the power boxes that the machine was hooked up to.
It's worth having more feelings.
With all the power boxes taken care of, I headed back to the tunnels to wait until noon. Once I was back at the not burned down workshop, I was able to access Otto's minicom where Frank had very kindly provided the code to get into the container. I had thought about gunning for Charlie's slab again, but I'd already died twice and didn't fancy looping after everything I'd collected, so I left Charlie alone and headed to Carl's Bay. After taking out the surrounding henchmen, I was able to access Otto's container and sabotage the fireworks just like Frank had detailed in his drunken rambling to Harriet.
I completely botched the flappy things.
I headed back to Carl's Bay in the evening in an attempt to catch a glimpse of the explosion that would take place when Frank lit the fireworks, but I couldn't get a good enough view. I headed into the open window where Pick was living, as I hadn't forgotten about them, but this time I made sure not to trip the wires. I found a note on the floor left by Pick with the code to get into the locked back room. Inside were 2 trinkets implying that Pick had died in this room. I looped back around to the afternoon to see if I could catch them before they killed themselves and found...
What? Yes! 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 Come on, yes!
You're not gonna...
No. I'm not like them. I can remember before. What I think is actually real.
Oh, I know that feeling.
And you. When I heard that announcement this morning, you were the only one who could have stopped me. Alright. I'm ready. You can kill me now.
Or you could join me. We go kill these motherfuckers and we all get out of here faster.
No. If I do that, I lose what you've given me. I have something to remember. Something to hold on to, and now I know it's real and it's pure and it's...
Love?
home.
Oh, right.
I have to loop first thing. Every day, until I'm there. I can't risk forgetting this. You understand?
Yeah, I think I do.
Now, get us out of here, Colt. Get us home.
Can you at least tell me your name?
Pick Rexley.
That's a,
Come on, you're named after a horse, pal. Let's just stay focused here.
Shit. I'll see you when we get there.
With that, I looped back around to the afternoon because I needed to figure out how to get Dr. Wenjie away from the complex. I headed over to her lab and began taking out Wenjie after Wenjie after Wenjie. Did I die? Yes, I did. But I eventually managed to get through the waves of Wenjies and made my way into her office using the code that Charlie had so kindly provided. Wenjie had been keen to get into the audio lock door in Updam, but wasn't having any luck. She knew it was from Operation Horizon, the military presence that had been on the island before Eon. Wenjie had also documented that at night, all visiting Wenjies went back to their own timelines and left just one of them, which is the reason why she was impossible to get to at nighttime. She fortified herself inside her bunker and wouldn't leave for any reason, except if she could get access to that audio-locked door.
Feeling exclusive.
On the minicom, it appeared that Aleksis desperately wanted Wenjie at his party and was begging Charlie to let him use 2-bit to broadcast a message to her every day, forever, so she'd want to go to the party. Charlie strongly refused, and so Aleksis uninvited Charlie from the epic party. The plan appeared to be...
So, Wenjie wants a door, Aleksis wants a Wenjie. I want to party with them both, violently.
Also, in another message, Wenjie asked why Julianna had ordered the power station inside the complex be sealed in the morning. Julianna was very clear that she didn't want me snooping around down there. Before leaving the complex, I headed over to Egor's base and snooped around there instead to see if I could find any intel of worth. After checking the minicom, it appeared that Egor was desperate to attend Alexis' party in the evening and begged Aleksis to let him attend, much to Aleksis' resistance. Another note in the apartment showed that Egor had accidentally applied his Aether Slab properties to an inanimate object and was desperate to nullify the effects. Fortunately for him, Wenjie had a machine that could do just the trick, so told him to borrow as many as he'd like. In a voice recording left by Egor, he explained that the machine that he'd accidentally turned invisible was part of an experiment where he hoped to be able to communicate with the future.
If I am correct in my theory, and I think I am, I will be able to cross space and time and talk to the future.
After all that, I slipped away into the tunnels. Thanks to the conversation between Aleksis and Charlie in Wenjie's lab, I now knew that 2-bit had the ability to not only broadcast audio clips, but edit them as well, so I looped through to noon and headed back to Updam. After taking out the goons, I went to see 2-bit, who wasn't happy with me at all.
Captain is bad at instruction follow.
What?
The captain killed Master Charlie after 2-bit spoke specific command line not to.
Shit, it does remember.
2-bit said that already.
But he got over that pretty quickly and told me that the only way for him to edit and play a recording saying what I want was if I had a previous recording of someone's voice that he could rip up and put back together. So I needed to find a recording of Aleksis. On my way out, I killed Charlie and grabbed another shift upgrade. I slipped away into the tunnels to wait until evening where I could break into Aleksis' party to find an audio clip of his voice. After swiftly working my way around the outskirts of Updam, I made my way over to Aleksis' mansion and found a way inside. As I was watching the comedy show from a balcony, a trapdoor opened beneath the comic and ground him into minced meat. I turned around and saw a button with the words "gonna leave a stain" glowing ominously next to it. I pressed the button and found that it was connected to that very trapdoor. All I had to do next was figure out which one was Aleksis and then get him to stand on the trapdoor. I decided to try it on an Eternalist and I can confirm it worked very well. Unfortunately, it did alert everyone to my presence. In the firefight, I died twice, but also did manage to kill Aleksis. With him gone and most of the Eternalists taken care of, I was free to wander his mansion to look for clues. One of the things I found was a DJ booth where Aleksis had specifically catered his own personal playlist. I headed up to his bedroom and found a letter from Julianna saying that his initial response to the Eon program had been rejected and that Gideon, the delivery guy who had booths all over Blackreef, had delivered Aleksis' submission to the library and that it would be locked in a safe at noon. She even provided the code to retrieve it. It looked like I had my recording of Aleksis to give to 2-Bit. On his minicom, I found a message from Egor excited that his machine actually worked and he had communicated with the future so wouldn't be attending the party. After all that, I headed over to the antenna to unlock the tunnels and accidentally teleported onto a mine set by an invading Julianna, killing me and resetting the loop. I looped to noon and headed to the library to retrieve Aleksis' submission to the Eon program, which was super loud and obnoxious.
Julianna, sweetheart. When I got your message about this interview, I thought, yeah, fucking my favorite topic. Me.
Sit
I love you so much, but these questions. Are you serious? How do I organize my time?
Please
people
stop.
My greatest
Stop
regret.
it.
What the fuck is this? You want me to give a testimony, right? Tell you all my secrets. Hey, I'll sweeten the deal.
And then proceeded to make my way over to 2-Bit, who was going to help me broadcast it to Wenjie. After giving 2-Bit the recording and having him splice it up for me to make something spicy, I asked if I'd ever done this before and he confirmed that I had. 2-Bit then explained that he had been deleting tons of his own memory because every loop Charlie seemed to get meaner and he couldn't handle it. After giving 2-Bit a bit of a pep talk,
You gotta stand up for yourself. Be tall. Pop him in the mouth. You know?
The captain references ambulatory functionality, but 2-Bit does not have lyrics?
You don't need to be able to run in order to be strong, okay? You're loyal. That's the strongest quality a sentient being can have.
Captain defines 2-Bit as user.
Sure, record that in your memory and don't dump it, no matter what he says. When all this is done, I'll see if I can make you more mobile. Hook you up to one of those snow trucks or something.
The captain is now qualified gunman to 2-Bit. Stored to memory, never forgotten. Thank you.
Never in my wildest dreams.
The captain upgraded to power user. Your commands are always processed.
he upgraded me to a power user and said that any command I gave him would always be processed. I asked him to evacuate the building, although I'd already killed almost everyone already, and then I went to take out Charlie again to get the next shift upgrade. After that, I slipped away into the tunnels. It was finally time to take on Egor and obtain the Aether Slab. I headed out to the complex and made my way through Egor's traps, only to run into an invading Julianna. We managed to kill each other at the same time, which seemed somewhat poetic. I picked up the last shift upgrade from her, the Havoc Slab, and Residuum, and headed over to Egor, who was completely isolated, buried in his scientific studies. I made my way toward him and topped him off with a headshot and picked up the Aether Slab. I found Egor's experiment that caused him to not make it to the party, the one that had allowed him to communicate with the future. It seemed that all I had to do was shut down the experiment before the evening and he'd then attend the party. I headed up to his bunker again, and this time I found a note detailing the exact time and code that the machine communicated with the future, so all I needed to do was input this code before the time specified and it would stop working. After all of that, I slipped away into the tunnels. Next on the list was Fia Zborowska, so I headed over to Freestad Rock at noontime to find the secret code that she'd left Charlie to gain access to the secret love shack. I made my way over to her base and accidentally alerted everyone to my presence, which resulted in a lengthy firefight. After that, I headed inside and had a look around. I found an art piece on the wall as soon as I entered, but it wasn't one that I was looking for, which meant that this was going to be more difficult than I had anticipated. The menu had clues to the location of each painting, which was somewhat helpful. I worked my way into the compound and began doing the rounds. Whilst skulking around a repair room, everyone became immediately alerted to my presence, probably after seeing the residue left over from their dead comrades. I took them all out and then went on to find one of the 4 pictograms that was required to open the weird computer. I headed back into the repair room with a crank wheel I'd found and noticed some schematics for Fia's reactor, which I was sure would come in handy later. A nearby voice recording explained that the reactor was already there before Eon arrived on the scene and it was left over from Operation Horizon. Somebody called Berezin had actually requested that the reactor be shut down completely before Horizon left Blackreef, but evidently that hadn't happened and now Fia had it up and running again. I found a couple more paintings, but they were
not the one I'm looking for.
I found a side room with a note from Gideon, the delivery guy, saying to Fia that he'd set up all the delivery machines across the island and it didn't make sense for her to put limits on who can use them because if they were stuck in a time loop, there would be no upkeep. With that, there was a code written on the whiteboard of 4121, which I assumed was for the delivery machines. I continued to work my way through the complex, finding more art that I didn't need, and after heading back into the repair room to leave my crank wheel there, I happened to stumble across another painting, but one that I actually did need. 2 down, 2 to go. I worked my way through the complex, making sure that I didn't alert Fia to my presence by taking out the guards one by one. Eventually, I made it to her ivory tower and gave her a gentle neck break. I picked up her slab, trinkets and residuum and continued on. After heading through the complex and coming out the back, I found the 3rd painting I was looking for. Just one more to go. The clue given was it marks Fia's stage exit, so I headed back into the main area and looked around until I found a door with a painting. With all 4 paintings found, it was time to head to the secret bunker in the afternoon, armed with the code to get in, but not before disabling the reactor. I headed to the tunnels and then came back to Freestad Rock and headed over to the bunker. Using the paintings I found at Fia's and the blueprint on the table, I was able to work out the code to getting into the bunker. I headed to the bottom and found a note from Charlie who was upset that Fia hadn't shown up to their spicy rendezvous. Of course, he didn't know that he was writing to a ghost. I headed into the main part of the bunker and found a switch. After pulling it, the bunker began to fill up with water, so I made a swift exit and watched the water rise to a very sudden still stop at the top. I slipped away into the tunnels and made my way over to the complex to hopefully pick up a very useful Aether upgrade from Egor. Unfortunately, I didn't pick it up this time, so I headed out and came back the next loop to try again. I didn't pick it up this time either, so around I went. I didn't pick it up this time either, so around I went again. I'd finally picked up the upgrade on my 5th attempt on Egor's life, and it granted me the ability of Ghost. How Aether normally worked was if the slab was active, your power would be drained, but with Ghost, if you were stood still, the power bar wouldn't move at all. After all that, I headed back to the complex in the morning to find Egor's machine. After grabbing a nullifier to nullify the Aether's effect on the machine, I punched in the numbers and hit the switch, and with the machine disabled, Egor would be showing up at Alexis's party in the evening, meaning 3 Visionaries would be in attendance. Before heading out, I decided to check out the power station that was hidden beneath the complex, as it was only open in the morning before Julianna had it closed to stop me from getting in there. As I made my way toward the entrance, a safe caught my eye. To open it, I needed a crank wheel, and I knew exactly where to get one. I headed over to Wenjie's lab, grabbed the crank wheel, headed back to the safe, and found a gun that I didn't want. Inside the power station control room, I found a letter from Wenjie explaining that to open up an adjoining power station door, I'd need to reactivate a minimum of 2 generators. I headed back up and found that the door I needed to unlock had an Operation Horizon logo on it, which meant that these doors had insight into what happened on the island over 30 years prior. I headed back down and overheard 2 Eternalists talking about how the generators needed batteries to generate power. I took them out, powered up 2 generators, headed up the stairs and slapped the switch. I headed through the Horizon door and found a secret military bunker with some key intel. There was a note that explained that there was an anomaly incident where they lost a lot of experimental assets, including a person called the Captain, and when combined with a voice recording left close by, it's revealed that the Captain was me. In the letter written to a Natalie Sobel, she is told that due to the previous head science officer losing their position, she has now taken on that role, and because of this, she has a lot of extra responsibilities, which meant that she needed to be entrusted with a bunch of passkeys, including the power station switch
switch cases. To find this, I'd need to head to Updam and locate the archival office. Another note detailed that I had in fact made contact with the anomaly, and after entering it I had disappeared. At the time of the note, I'd been missing for 7 weeks and presumed dead. I headed back to the power station and booted up all the remaining generators before realizing that I needed the code from the archival office to hit the other switches, so I headed out and slipped away into the tunnels. I waited until the afternoon and headed to the archivist office where the gate had very kindly been left open. Inside I found an upturned chair on some tarpaulin where I assumed some sort of torture scene went on, but I wasn't too sure. I pressed onwards into the archivist office and found that it wasn't Horizon's office anymore, it was Eon's. After looking around for a little bit, I found a scrap of paper labelled classified information. On the note it provided a passkey to get into the Updam rack facility, which I assumed was the bunker with a microphone.
Hello?
Julianna then radioed in
You thought it was going to be easy?
and revealed that she was hiding in the giant antenna above the complex. After browsing the office a little more, I headed to the rack facility, stated the passkey,
Shorthand.
and breezed on in. Inside the facility, I found a weird-looking rocket ship called the
Raketo Plan.
The RAC team confirmed
Right.
they make the deadline if they forego the
I knew that.
and a note explaining that during the time when I would be flying into the anomaly, they had determined that the window for a successful entrance through the gate was going to happen 6 weeks earlier than anticipated, and so had to forego a lot of safety measures to ensure that I'd be able to make it through, which probably explained why I went missing during the actual launch. Unfortunately, the door to the Raketo Plan was sealed shut with another voice-activated password. A note on the door gave me the password I needed to open the power station's control room switches, so I headed back after taking on Charlie's Moxie game and getting into a firefight with a sniper who lived above the bakery. After that, I slipped away into the tunnels. I looped around to the morning and headed to the complex where Julianna told me that I'd actually been on the island previously, which I already knew, but I'd been there for 17 years that first time and had escaped back in the 50s, and now I was back with Eon thanks to Egor. With that, I headed back into the power station, turned on all the generators, opened up the switches with the code I'd found and slapped them all to oblivion. After that, I slipped away into the tunnels and headed over to Updam to seek out the next bunker. I looked around for a while before realising there was an upstairs, so headed up there and found a letter detailing one of the passkeys that I needed to get into the Raketo Plan. It also contained information detailing that there was a failsafe on the Raketo Plan that would only activate once the anomaly reached maximum instability, which I'd already learned would be caused by taking out all of the Visionaries. The letter also detailed that one of the other passkeys was a word that I'd chosen myself. I headed out of Updam and headed over to Freestad Rock to find the second Horizon bunker, which was located at the back of Fia's base. Upon entry, I found a note detailing an unnamed subject but highly implied to be me, where it explained that the woman I was with who was on the island with me was pregnant and hadn't told me about it before I disappeared into the anomaly. My only guess was that this was Lila, the one whose photograph was on my minicom in my apartment. There was another note that explained that after the experiment where I'd gone missing, the anomaly had disappeared, and so Horizon were finding it difficult to justify their presence on the island. There was a voice recording from Lila herself, again solidifying the idea that the pregnant woman was in fact Lila and I was the father. In the final note, it's revealed plainly that a Lila Blake was pregnant with my child. It also provided the second passkey to enter the Raketo Plan. At this point, Colt learned some juicy gossip that caused him an existential crisis.
Lila Blake. Julianna Blake. No! Come on, no! Fuck!
Before heading out to the next location to find the final passkey, I headed over to the bunker where Charlie and Fia were cozied up together. I punched in the code, made my way down, and took both parties out with some clean headshots. As I headed out of the bunker, I was greeted by another Colt.
Oh, it's you. Congrats! You killed them. Not really.
Who appeared very drunk, explaining that it used to be him sneaking a girl into the bunker. He explained that all Colts were leavers and that would never change. After a brief, incoherent exchange, other Colt left, and Colt gave this somewhat witty reply.
Who's the leaver now?
I headed out and slipped away into the tunnels. There was one Horizon bunker left to check, so I headed out to Carl's Bay. Colt asked Julianna about what he had found out in the Freestad Rock bunker as the game took a Korean thriller twist, and Julianna exclaims,
Any chance?
Yes, I am your daughter.
With that now in mind, I headed over to the Horizon bunker at Carl's Bay to find the last passkey to grant me access to the Raketoplan. I was greeted by another Colt who had come to retrieve a voice recording that had Lila's voice on it. He explained that he'd tried to use the Eon program to head back to before he disappeared into the anomaly to be with Lila again, but it had clearly not worked. After I told him I'd be breaking the loop, he doubted that and then shot himself and vanished. The voice recording was between Colt and Lila as they played a word game, and he decided to play his passkey as the winning phrase and had decided to record the occasion as a way of immortalizing his victory. Although the recording didn't state what the phrase was, it did jog my memory.
I bow to you, oh mighty word King Colt.
Zenith? Zenith. Yep, Lila was right. I played my password.
There was also a note left by Lila explaining that Horizon was sending her home and that if Colt managed to find his way back, then he should try and find her, but she wouldn't wait forever. I headed out of the bunker and slipped away into the tunnels. In the morning, I headed over to Updam to finally gain access to the rack facility, and after stating all the passkeys,
Ironclad, Troika, Zenith,
I entered into the bunker and found yet another Colt waiting to speak to me. Other Colt was trying to get the Raketoplan to work by shooting it and screaming profanities into the sky, which obviously didn't work. I explained that 7 Visionaries needed to be killed before it could light up due to the failsafe mechanic built into it. Other Colt was somewhat disillusioned with my plan and explanation, but he relented and vanished.
You are some kind of fucked up man.
With all that taken care of, the last person on the list to kill was Aleksis Dorsey. I headed out and slipped away into the tunnels. I waited until the evening and then headed to Updam to figure out the last Visionary lead tied to Aleksis. As I entered Updam, Julianna explained that this wasn't the first time that I'd destabilized the loop and gone to see her using the Raketoplan. When Colt questioned why he was still on the island, Julianna claimed that he always came around eventually and loved it there. I worked my way over to Alexis's mansion using the same route as before. I scaled over the rooftops and found Wenjie pacing around, surrounded by a bunch of Eternalists. I decided to leave her alone though because I was after Aleksis this time round. To finish the Visionary lead and start the final loop, I needed to gain access to Alexis's bathroom because I'd heard from an Eternalist that he creates his best music while sat on the toilet. After finding the bathroom with the music player sat next to it, I memorized the code and headed over to the DJ booth I'd seen previously. After getting to the DJ booth, I realized I'd forgotten the order already, so headed back to the toilet, checked again, then headed back to the booth. After punching in the numbers and waiting for Aleksis to show up, I was able to determine which one was him based on how much he grooved to his own musical abomination. After identifying which one was him, I changed the code so he'd leave and tried to mint him up with the grinder, but he waltzed on by as if the floor hadn't just tried to swallow him whole. I decided to just take him out with the sniper instead. I didn't bother to collect the upgrades or trinkets and just headed out, slipping away into the tunnels. It was finally time for me to break the loop. So here it is in all its glory. In the morning, I headed to Carl's Bay to take care of Harriet and sabotage Frank's fireworks. Noontime, I headed to the complex to stop Egor's machine from contacting the future. afternoon, I headed to Freestyle Rock to take care of Charlie and Fia. Finally, in the evening, I headed to Updam to take care of Egor, Wenjie and Aleksis, not forgetting poor Frank and his exploding fireworks. After taking out each of the final Visionaries, there was only one that remained, Julianna. I headed to the rack facility and boarded the Raketa plant in high hopes that this would be the end of the loop.
Raketa plant. I lost this thing. Oh! Oh, okay.
After crash landing the Raketa plant atop the antenna, I made my way into the innards of the structure with just one thing on my mind. As I walked into the antenna, the glowing text revealed to me that Colt was also a visionary and that to break the loop, he also needed to die. As I entered, my slabs were nullified and the endgame had finally arrived. I'll let the final scenes play themselves out.
Welcome back.
This ain't normal.
In that case, are dueling pistols. Vintage pieces, original oil cartridges, completely unique.
Kinda dusty.
They're museum pieces, part of history, worth preserving, like Blackreef. Please, sit.
I'd rather stand. Thanks.
Did it ever occur to you that I always wake up first? So if we survive the collapse of the loop, you'll wake up with the barrel of my gun in your mouth.
Dying for real beats living like this.
You mean living with me? You hate me.
Living here, stuck in this fulfilling day.
You used to like me. You used to see this place for what it could be. Then, you murdered me.
So you could have a real life, without do-overs.
And I thought you were ready for answers.
Great, fine.
I get it. You've been through a lot. You finally know how to break this place, but that doesn't mean you know how to use it.
Sure I do. Target practice.
Colt.
What? Want me to write a book, paint a fucking portrait?
I want you to ask questions. About this place. About me. About the other Colts.
So I can forget the answers like everyone else.
People forget because they're bored. You're not bored, are you?
Not the word I'd use.
So stay. I'll show you incredible things.
How many times have we had this exact conversation? Is there a version of your fun that isn't us killing
hey,
each
listen.
other?
I came here to be Eon's fucking arcanist. You murdered me over and over. So, yeah, I fought back, and I learned to like it.
Every fight gets old eventually.
But you love the hunt. You started this.
then it's on me to end it. For everyone.
You know, no one will forgive you. I won't forgive you.
It's happening.
It doesn't have to. Colt, you still have a choice. Take the pistol.
Are these antiques even gonna fire?
If you pull the trigger.
And if I don't?
Amazing things. Other worlds, other times.
Where we kill each other.
Sounds like fun. On 3. 1.
I've come too far.
And with the last but one Visionary dead, I had a choice to make. Either sit in the chair and reset the loop once again, or end it once and for all.
Julianna. It, worked? Okay. Here goes.